of all, I want to welcome everyone to our free session. We really don't usually have this many folks. This is great to get the word out that we would like to have you all come to our free session. And we're going to start with our work session first. I know some of you are here for the golf, and that probably won't be till like 2 o'clock. Are y'all okay with that?
You bet.
Are you with the golf? Yes, you're the golf as well. Okay, right. So let's go ahead and get started on our work session with the Downtown Amarillo Inc. and David Wallace, Joe. Where did he go? Oh, there he is. I'm sorry, I can't see with him on. And of course, Les Simpson and Melissa Daly. So we will turn it over to them here.
Sure, I think that would be the best way to get started. Downtown Amarillo Inc.'s been working for y'all now for a little over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming back to you today. This is a follow-up to the 2 presentations they made to you during the month of October. And they're here today about making a recommendation to you to look for a public-private partner for some potential projects.
Let me just say a couple of words before I turn it over to Melissa, because she's got a short presentation and then we're going to hear from David. But obviously, in the Downtown Strategic Action Plan that was developed through the city process, and there was a lot of public input, there are a lot of parts to it. But one of it, the charge that Downtown Amarillo Incorporated was given is to look at finding various developers, people that come here to invest in our community. As we've researched that, obviously there's lots of private developers that are people right now working on various projects. But when we went to look at other communities and tried to say, what have other communities done and what are keys for them being successful in downtown development? There are quite a few things, and some of those things we've been working on, some of them we will work on. But one thing that came to the top pretty much with each of the communities that we visited, anywhere from South Carolina to Texas, and looking at Oklahoma City and Memphis and other places, is that particularly in the early stages of downtown redevelopment, in order to help serve as a catalyst for downtown redevelopment, there is often, in the places that you've seen success, there's been a public-private partnership involving a development company coming in and working with the public side on key projects in the area. It doesn't have to be downtown, but many places it is, on looking for, working to bring the strengths of both the public and private side together to do something that is a good quality, great standard, and an efficient way to be able to do it. And so when we look at places, and if you look at Waco, you look at Lubbock, you look at Oklahoma City, you look at other these places, as they begin to try to redevelop a particular area, specifically downtown, each one of them, including Lubbock right now and others, has worked with an initial kind of partnership on public-private development. And this is a key part from what we've been able to learn in studying other areas of redevelopment, at looking at a partner to be able to do this. And so our goal today is to come in, after spending nearly the last 2 years trying to look for a potential partner that would come in for a project like this to help with the public projects, but also to be able to bring capital money, private money to help on private projects as well. That's kind of why we're here today. And so we spent a lot of time, energy, and effort going through this process. We looked in the yellow pages. There's no private-public category in the yellow pages at the moment. In fact, to find good ones, yes, they're hard to find. And we went out and really worked hard to recruit someone. This is somebody you'll hear a little bit more that wasn't necessarily looking to come to Amarillo to do it. They have their hands full in a lot of other places. But when we began to talk with them, realized that we really think that this is somebody that we would recommend to the city and the city commission that they consider looking at this as a partnership to help in some key projects and being a catalyst for downtown revitalization. So we really think this is, of all the steps that our community could take in looking at downtown, this is probably a very pivotal one. And so that's why we've spent a lot of time trying to make sure that as we come forward to make a recommendation to you, as the city commission and the city, that we've tried to do that in a methodical way, and I'll let Melissa kind of talk about it.
Well, thank you. Always going back to the strategic plan, which we were really brought in for the purposes of implementing the strategic plan. Again, looking at some of those key projects, and a key to all of these being the synergy of these projects. How do we create a synergy with the kinds of projects that are recommended, that we're already looking at, such as the convention hotel, to bring other development. And so, the minor league ballpark is a recommendation in terms of exploring that possibility in the strategic plan and convention hotel. The urban living, which has been such a critical component for us in bringing people to live downtown. So, a major role for us was to identify a catalyst project or projects that could bring that synergy. And those projects, the hotel, a multi-purpose venue, the garage, which is just critical to all of it, so that we can develop up in a more dense way, and then the mixed-use residential. And then along with that, who could be our private development partner? So we began to do, the planning, the land use plan that you've all seen, but at the same time seeking out a development partner that could work with us on implementation of this. So as we looked at the potential initial redevelopment areas, and I say initial because downtown redevelopment, people have asked me, how long is this going to take? Forever. To me, it's like taking care of your heart. You don't just do it once. You got to watch what you eat. You got to watch your cholesterol. It's an ongoing process that can't ever stop. And so, likewise, we'll always be looking at downtown. But what we want to look at is what is that initial major project or projects that could create some synergy to really get us kind of leapfrogging forward in the redevelopment. As we looked at those areas, the central business zone, the civic center area, the warehouse area. We began to focus on the civic center area because of the initial, some of those initial projects, like the Globe News Center going in that area, of course, the civic center, and then looking at a convention hotel. How can we take those projects and move that forward in a more meaningful way? And then being adjacent to the warehouse area, which is such an important component of that, because it offers the opportunity for the residential. So another really key factor as we began to look at this area was the publicly owned land. That has been really key. Is there an area where there is a significant enough amount of public land to be able to do both the public projects and perhaps even private redevelopment? And you see here the study area that we looked at, which is about a 50-block area. Almost about half of that is publicly owned by the cities. So the process that we went through to identify a partner.
Can I go back one? I'm sorry, one slide, Melissa. That dark blue, that hasn't been developed yet. Nothing there has been developed. Is that where our civic center is?
Well, the big thing is the civic center. So yes, there's some of that's vacant or parking lots, and some of it's developed.
Okay, thank you.
A great deal of it is not developed. So as we identified those keys for success, what do we need to do to not only come up with a plan, but move forward on implementing the plan? A clear vision, and I think the strategic plan, of course, was the starting point of that. It was kind of the 20,000-foot plan, and then bringing that down to say a 5,000-foot plan with a land use plan. More specificity in terms of how do we move forward on a key initial project. Synergy is key to all of this. They all make each other work better. So rather than just doing a convention hotel, we can do several projects and they all make each other more successful. And at the end of the day, ultimately then require less public money in each because they're all more successful because of each other. And flexibility, and you've seen several of the proposed land use plans. Flexibility is key in all of this. Change is inevitable, and as we begin to look at possibilities, things are going to change. So as we move forward in this process, we definitely need to be flexible. The feasibility assessments, many of which, if not most of which, have actually already been done. The hotel study, which was underway when I got here, the multi-purpose venue, on Monday we'll have a public meeting to present the findings of that, the feasibility study on that. The housing study for downtown has been complete, a parking study and the land use study, all of those have been complete as part of the due diligence and moving forward on this. Public input has been key. We've had many public meetings. We'll continue to have public meetings to get the public engaged and get comments and input. And then the private sector partner, as Les said, being a really pivotal part of this. Specifically, there's a lot of developers out there, but looking for a developer that's experienced in urban redevelopment, which is not the easiest kind of development to do. It's complicated. Lots of moving parts, lots of partners. You're dealing with a built environment, so lots of physical aspects that you have to deal with to work with the city in a public-private partnership. So as Les said, he kind of went over this, but we visited other downtowns, identified some common principles, and also potential developers. We talked to a number of both local developers and other developers throughout the Panhandle and Texas for over a year now. And, we'll continue to, of course, this is not, as I said, this is not it. We continue to talk to developers and property owners as we move forward in redevelopment. So these are really the key development partner characteristics, and this is a pretty heavy-duty list of characteristics, and it's something that the combination of these began to narrow the field. As Les said, unfortunately, there's not a whole list of them in the yellow pages. As you begin to look at the groups that have this kind of expertise and capital, that list gets pretty small. So expertise specifically in urban redevelopment projects, demonstrated successful projects on the ground. We wanted to see projects that have been implemented and were successful, and the ability to bring private capital. That's really key and challenging in this economic market. Wanted a partner that has demonstrated success in working with public and private partners, because of course the public in particular is going to be a key role in this redevelopment. And then demonstrate ability to communicate and work with and encourage input from the public. This is of course a key project because we're talking about potential public funds, a key part of this project. So our recommendation is to consider working with Wallace Development Partners as that public partner in this particular area of redevelopment, in the Civic Center area of redevelopment. David Wallace and Joe Asher here from Wallace Pajali, and I'm not going to get into what they have done. They're going to talk about that, I think, much better than me. But they have just generally, they have demonstrated experience with all of the characteristics I just went through. They've met all of those criteria, have been involved in more than $1 billion in improvements in urban settings, have successful projects on the ground that you can go see and touch and feel, and have worked and have invigorated these communities with those developments. They're able to bring capital, private capital, to Amarillo. Very important part of that, and have extensive experience in working with both public and private partners on both sides of the fence, from both the policy and the staff level. And then have coordinated successful communication, education, outreach efforts with the public on all of these projects, or they wouldn't have happened. And these communities have had some of the same kinds of things that we've dealt with here. So recommended path forward would be a contract for a public-private partnership with the city, DAI, and Wallace Pajali. Wallace Pajali would share in the cost for evaluation of project components, which they have already actually done a good bit of with us and working with us as we move forward on some of the due diligence. Need to be at risk during the evaluation phase. They need to bring private capital.
What does that mean?
Well, that means that, in other words, they don't, what we would propose, and I think what they would propose is they're at risk just like we're at risk in terms of these projects being successful. It's not an upfront kind of arrangement where all of those at-risk funds are being paid up front. Working with the city and DAI in evaluation of project elements as we move forward through the process. Providing recommendations to the city and DAI on project components, of course. Potential leasing land from the city for various project elements, and that's where the parking garage too is so key, because it allows us to free up land for redevelopment and higher density kind of development downtown. They would develop and administer a selection process for the flag and operator of a convention hotel, as well as an operator of the stadium. and would work with the city and DAI to continue to seek public input. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are now on that. I went through it kind of quickly because I want to allow enough time for Dave. I'd like to turn over to Dave Wallace and let him kind of go through a little more about Wallace.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager, thank you once again for taking the time to meet with us today and for giving us an opportunity to talk a little bit about Wallace for Jolly and, more importantly, some really magnificent things that we see here in Amarillo. Obviously, there's a lot of history in this wonderful community. That's okay, I'll move down to that.
Sure.
Yeah, that's right. Some wonderful history in this community, and we're honored and proud to be sitting here today. What Melissa asked us to do was to talk a little bit about the history of Wallace for Jolly, and specifically both the public sector experience as well as the private sector experience that we have, and how we think we might be able to add some value here in Amarillo. In order to do that, I'd like to go back several years when I first got involved in real estate, which was back in 1982, a long time ago. And if you'll remember, back in the early 80s, if you were involved in real estate, you quickly know what goes up comes down with respect to real estate values in the mid-80s. During the mid part of the 80s, I worked with the Thatcher family from the United Kingdom, and ultimately became Lady Thatcher's chief of staff and ran her private office after she stepped down from being prime minister.
Wow.
And I say that from the standpoint of public-private partnerships. And I saw about $27 billion of privatization take place in the United Kingdom with British Gas, British Telecom, British Coal. And it really helped me to instill in me the use of how can the private sector come forward and work with the public sector. It can be really good public policy, but more importantly, it can be really great fiscal policy for the public sector. And it really helped me early on in my career. Fast forward, I became the mayor of the city of Sugar Land, which is where I first met Joe. At that time, Joe had just joined the city of Sugar Land as the economic development director for the city. Ultimately, he became responsible for a number of areas, airport, parks and recreation, but always stayed responsible for the economic development activities of the city of Sugar Land. But within 30 days of being elected mayor of the city of Sugar Land, I sat down with our city manager and said, let's pull out the yellow pages. And if there is a private sector company that can do our job quicker, faster, cheaper, better than us, let's reach to the private sector. Let's reach to the private sector economies of scale, efficiency, ingenuity, capital, manpower, to be able to make the goods and services that we provide to our citizens better. And that's exactly what we did. And so we started a push in reaching to the private sector on many things that I know Amarillo was already doing, whether it's water, wastewater, solid waste disposal, those type of public services. But we decided to take it one step further from the standpoint of let's reach out to our community. Let's let our community decide what we want to be when we grow up. What type of recreation assets do we want to have? What type of office, retail, all of those different type of components. And what do we want to be when we grow up? And so we put together a different visioning task force, different committees, citizen committees, and reaching out to the citizens so that when we brought everything together, it wasn't a plan of then sitting mayor or the commissioners or city staff, it was the community's vision. And then we as a public institution reached out to the private sector and said, what private sector developers do we want to bring to the table to partner with us for many of the same reasons that I mentioned? I say that from the standpoint that when you focus on those things that matter for the community, as I know Amarillo has done time and time again, when you don't have to worry about the Clean Water Act, you don't have to worry about the clarity of water, color of water, the smell of water, because you've got a private sector that's responsible for that, your taxes can come down, and you can really focus on those quality of life things that matter. In the city of Sugar Land, this is what happened to our tax rate as we started reaching out to the private sector to become the second lowest tax rate in the state of Texas. I'm a very competitive guy. When TML came out with their information and said we were the second lowest, I quickly got in my car and went to Tyler, which was the first lowest, and found out exactly what they were doing. It's always helpful to have oil residual revenue going into the city coffers. But in any event, and I know Amarillo is number 3.
I was thinking too, but there you go. There you go. What do I know?
But when you can focus on economic development,
I know.
when all of those other private sector type of activities take place, when you partner with the private sector to bring business, when you partner to bring office, commercial, retail, this is what happens to the assessed value. This is what happens to the sales tax collection as you continue to move forward. And from an economic development standpoint, as I mentioned, it became a huge impetus of our community that we want to grow our community. And anytime you can bring a community of 100 jobs, 1,000 jobs, whatever the case may be, to your community, it doesn't matter whether it's Amarillo, it doesn't matter whether it's Sugar Land, Waco, Tyler, it does not matter. It continues to help the overall community. And those are the type of things that took place. As I mentioned, you don't do things for awards, but when you can focus on what really matters for the community, you can then become the 5th safest city. You have all of these quality of life type of things that affect your community. When you establish the quality of life, then many of the companies, as you're out there recruiting them to come into your community, obviously, there's more than just an incentive. There's more than just education. There's a lot of other quality of life issues that will affect them. Where we sit today, I truly feel that today is the perfect storm. And what I mean by that is the economy has been a little tricky. You can fill in whatever adjective you want. Tricky is one I'll use today. But the economy has been a little difficult. And every single public institution that's out there has a decline in whether it's their ad valorem taxes, hotel motel taxes, sales taxes, the different revenue streams that the communities have. And so it's creating pressure on the public sector. The private sector is no different. It's very difficult. I'm not sure if you've gone out trying to get a loan for a real estate project lately, but it is very difficult these days. And so you have a dilemma where there is a gap between what the private sector can do and what the public sector can do. And one of the areas of focus that our company has is how can we take the public sector experience that we have, sitting on your side of the dais, sitting on your side from a staff level, from a policy perspective, what are the things that we can do to help our community that truly matter? And then also focusing on it from the private sector. And how can we bring our capital, both equity, debt, sub-debt, other type of classes of capital, to the table to help work in an overall development? And that's exactly where the public-private partnership comes from, where you've got different institutions, different entities that are coming together and, in effect, doing projects that the public sector cannot do by themselves, nor can the private sector. But by joining forces and combining, you accomplish all of those different quality of life goals that we just talked about, and you make these projects a reality. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the International Council of Shopping Centers. ICSC is one of the largest trade associations in the United States. Once a year, what they will do is they will reach out to an individual to basically be a research scholar, and they will appoint them as a research scholar to do speeches, webinars, to write a book. Last year they appointed somebody as a research scholar to basically focus on sustainable development, green LEED certification development. This year they appointed me as the research scholar on economic development. And so I've already written the book, what you see there, Retail Development Through Public-Private Partnerships. This is not an infomercial. I'm not asking you to go to their website and buy today, for today and today only. But this is, okay, maybe this is an infomercial. But I would encourage you to look at the ICSC, because there are some great resources that are there. But what we focused on is it doesn't matter whether it's a retail development, it doesn't matter whether it's a mixed-use development, the policies, the philosophy of public-private partnership can work in so many different areas. And there are different areas of public space. Many times people think of a mixed-use development, well, that's where City Hall is, so we can build around it. There's a lot of other public uses. And in many of the developments that we're involved with, it might be a chamber of commerce, it might be a conference facility, a community gathering place. A situation where you've got the public sector that was going to be working on a capital project, that was going to be spending money on infrastructure. To the extent the private sector can come along and basically you can get economies of scale and basically share many of those costs. That's in effect what we've done in a number of our projects. As you can see on the left, the Waco Chamber of Commerce in downtown Waco. That's right at the heart of one of our mixed-use developments. On the right, the Sugar Land Hotel and Convention Center. That, again, is at the heart of what we created in Sugar Land. At the same time, a public-private partnership isn't just partnering with a city. There's a whole host of different types of revenue streams that can be created. Other type of investment vehicles, whether it's a local government corporation, public improvement district, downtown merchant association, a number of organizations that can be created to help create a revenue stream to fund it. At the same time, a lot of times people, when they focus on public-private partnerships, they're looking within their own balance sheet, within their own revenues. There's a lot of buckets of capital that are out there on a federal level, on a state level. As you can see here, just the Texas Enterprise Fund and the Emerging Technology Fund. As many of you know, I used to be the chairman-elect of the Texas One Economic Development Corporation. There's $400 million just on those first two line items alone that are available as incentives to recruit businesses to come to a community. Many times you don't think of that as a public-private partnership, but that is capital that you can use to be able to access for companies, for economic development purposes. And again, you know most of these already. From a local perspective, there are other type of incentives, other type of tools that can be created. And on many of the developments that we're involved with, at the time that we started, many of these tools were not in existence, but working with the public officials to, in effect, create those different vehicles. I've broken this up into different sections: public sector experience, public-private partnership experience, as well as private. Public sector experience. This is our Sugar Land Town Square. This is the city hall that we created. When I first became mayor, this was about 34 acres of an empty field. The unique thing about this was, for 160 years of growing sugar, processing sugar in Sugar Land, the icon was the refinery of Imperial Sugar. Now when people think of Sugar Land, they think of this. They think of Sugar Land Town Square. And so it's totally transformed things from an iconic structure perspective as to what Sugar Land was. Again, from a public sector experience, as I mentioned, we've got folks within our organization, Joe in particular, that have been responsible for recreation type of activities. In the downtown area, the downtown master plan drafts that we've seen, there are recreation activities. There's the master planning process that needs to be done as we continue to move forward. And that's not just a master plan on a piece of paper, but that is, from a community visioning standpoint, what do folks in the community want to be? So it was an empty field 5 years ago. Partnering with institutions to cut the ribbon on this facility when they first opened, University of Houston in Sugar Land. From a workforce development perspective, we sought them out to come to Sugar Land and to partner with this institution. And the day we opened this facility, 2,000 students from an enrollment perspective. To partner with other private, quasi-private, nonprofit organizations to create the Houston Museum of Natural Science in Sugar Land, a satellite facility. To partner with the private operators from an airport perspective, for the city of Sugar Land to be listed as the #1 fixed base operation in all of Americas this last year. Those are exciting things to be able to partner. #1 FBO, other things that have taken place that all started with reaching out to the community. Again, what we want it to be as we move forward. The redevelopment of Imperial Sugar, again, public sector experience that we have, Lake Point development as well. Again, all of these are public-private partnerships that we were very instrumental in its creation. Many, in this case, as the public sector. As I mentioned, Sugar Land Town Square, it totally transformed what people think of now when they think of the city of Sugar Land. Over $200 million of investment, over $50 million of that coming from the public sector. That was an incentive that this transaction would not have happened, this development would not have happened if it weren't for the public sector coming in. And this is what we've created in Sugar Land. As I mentioned, 5-6 years ago, this was an empty field. We could categorize what that revenue stream was going to be for hotel motel taxes, ad valorem, sales tax. But the one thing that we really could not get our arms around was the community impact. By having a community gathering place where we could have thousands upon thousands of people coming together in front of City Hall for concerts, for movies, for all the different things, for community gatherings, whether it's, in this case, the New Year's Eve party, our Christmas tree lighting, 17,000 people, movies under the moon, a community gathering place for thousands of people, Sugar Land Superstar, our American Idol, concerts, all of those things from the steps of City Hall. Those were things that really surprised us from a community gathering and lessons that we've learned. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of the band Sugar Land. I had never heard of Sugar Land, and a friend of mine at the U.S. Conference of Mayors called me and said that hey, on the weekends I'm a DJ in a country western station. There's a band you need to know about. And I said, what are they called? And they said, Sugar Land. I said, sure, we do need to know about them. We've had them twice on the steps of City Hall. This is where they released their second CD from the steps of City Hall, doing a simulcast where we literally had 7,000 people and with the radio airwaves broadcast live from Sugar Land. Those are the types of things that really affect your community and pride in your community. The headquarters of Minute Maid. Minute Maid would not have come to Sugar Land. In fact, they were criticized by Coca-Cola. Minute Maid is the largest subsidiary of Coca-Cola. They were criticized, saying, your space there, Sugar Land Town Square, it's awfully nice. We sure would love to have you just come back to Atlanta. But what the headquarters of Minute Maid, the decision makers, basically made the decision that that's the quality of life we want for our employees. And to bring over 400 employees with an average salary of $95,000, that definitely affects a local economy. Other office, all of these things were public-private partnerships. And I'm going at length here to show you many of these pictures because when you put these together, it truly is a partnership. And we have sat on both the public and the private sector side, again, the same side of the dais as I mentioned that you were on. And it really added nice, significant value to our community. From a private sector perspective, at this point in time, we've got over 20 different projects that we own, that we've developed, a few $100 million of assets, single-family lot developments that we've created, office buildings, commercial, public-private partnerships that we've done, in this case a partnership with the city of Pearland for their first Class A office building in Pearland. By the way, it's always nice when you have a rendering and the actual building actually looks like it, which is always a good thing. Senior transitional living, gated community, patio home, low maintenance, moving into independent facility, moving into assisted living, moving into memory care, all within the same type of community. These are the type of projects that we're involved with. Again, from the public-private, obviously, Texas Municipal League, just a couple of months ago, Frank Sturgill was talking just about the revenue streams and the lack thereof in every single community, how it's on decline at this point in time. The community visioning process is probably the most important process of any development. And that defines what the community wants. And that what we did in this situation, we knew that as leaders in our community, we were tired of our graduating seniors going off to college and not coming back. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to reach out to our community. We wanted to have, initially it started with a visioning task force of 25 individuals and then continued to grow from there. From an entertainment perspective, what type of entertainment assets do we want? We decided we want a minor league baseball. We decided we want a performance hall. We want festival sites. We want another hotel. This is all adjacent to the University of Houston Sugar Land. Children's Museum. And these were the things that we set in motion by reaching out to the private sector. But it started with the community visioning. We knew that we wanted a mall. When I first moved to the city of Sugar Land back in 1993, I remember seeing a sign that said mall coming this fall. And I remember talking to neighbors saying, this is exciting, we're going to get a mall here in Sugar Land. And everyone said, yeah, that sign's been there for 7 years. They knew it was coming in the fall, they just didn't know which fall it was actually going to be there. Until the city of Sugar Land said, we want a mall. We want this trade, we want this commerce, we want all of this retail to come to our community. So the city of Sugar Land said, we'll contribute $15 million in underground infrastructure in an incentive to get the mall there. The very first year of operations, net new incremental sales tax directly from the mall was between $5 and $6 million. and that has continued to grow. I don't know, you don't need a calculator. That's a good internal rate of return on your investment. And we have a policy in place within our city where we basically state for every dollar that we're going to invest, here's the type of direct economic return on investment on an internal rate of return basis that we're going to have. If it doesn't meet that criteria, we don't move forward. We were then concerned about being leapfrogged by another mall being developed in the future, and so we went back to General Growth Properties, said we would like to create more of a connection between the mall and Sugar Land Town Square, just 4 years ago. And we would like it to be a lifestyle, pedestrian-friendly type of an environment. And in fact, here's what we're willing to commit by way of an incentive. And this was the initial rendering. What you see in the foreground, all of that was a parking lot up until this time. And you can see the rendering. It's always nice when reality actually looks like the rendering. And that was the connection between the mall and Sugar Land Town Square. In Waco, about 7 years ago, I went to give a speech on water and wastewater infrastructure. And as I've said to some of you, it's a real riveting topic. I realize that. Many times you flush the toilet, you don't know where it goes. You just don't want it coming back. But I was talking about water and wastewater infrastructure. I walked out of the conference center with the then current mayor of Waco. And then I asked, what happened here? As I was looking around, why are all the buildings boarded up? Why is downtown as desolate as it is? And she proceeded to tell me that in 1953, a tornado went through downtown Waco, killed a couple hundred people, demolished much of the downtown, and many of the owners never rebuilt. That's what spurred a lot of the urban sprawl. A lot of the development took place in the suburbs. She said, you're a mayor of a fast-growing city. What would you do if you were me? And I said, give me 30 days and I'll come back with my recommendations. And I did. I came back with a plan as to here's how, from a private sector perspective, here's what we would be willing to invest in downtown Waco, and here's the partnership that we would like to create. And this was one of the renderings that we created. And as we continued to move forward, it was a tremendous experience. And it was interesting because it was in a point in time where, in talking with many of the folks in Waco, many of the people that we would talk with about investing in downtown Waco, population was less than 100 people in downtown Waco, that we were willing to invest in downtown Waco. At a point where Baylor students, incoming freshmen, were told, thou shalt not go west of 35. You will get robbed. It was a very difficult place. People were saying, you're going to lose your shirt. Don't make that investment. And we decided to make that investment. That's what it looks like today. To be able to go from a rendering, and you can see the Chamber of Commerce on the left. Fountains weren't working. Street lights weren't working. It was a very difficult situation in downtown Waco. As you can see, I like this picture just so you can see the fountains actually really do work today as you look at this. Taking 1930 vintage warehouses, which is the thing I like the most about this area here in Amarillo. And you can see the warehouse district. That infrastructure that is there, the Amarillo hardware buildings, all of that infrastructure, to be able to come in, no different than this. This was, like I said, a 1930 vintage cotton warehouse. And now it's 100% leased. Ninfos, Grazianos, Diamondbacks. This is a building that we own. You can see on the left side it's 3 stories. On the right side it's only 2. The right side used to be 3 stories until 1953 when the tornado ripped off the 3rd floor over there. But to be able to reinvigorate a downtown area, to be able to say we're actually going to bring students downtown in an environment where everyone is saying thou shalt not go west of 35. We sat down with the chief of police. So we want to do a beat accountability analysis, and we want to find out where your Part 1 and Part 2 crimes are actually happening. To have crimes against people, you actually have to have people there to commit the crime. And there was nobody in the downtown area. This was one of the safest parts of the area. There was a perception issue. And as we moved forward, said, all right, well, we're going to build student housing. And we did. And now between student housing, between the loft over retail, the things that we've created, we've taken by a factor of 10 the downtown population. I don't know about you, when I was in college, this is not what the dorms look like. Again, to go from a vision of loft residential over retail to reality. On this corner, I just signed the lease yesterday for Jimmy John's to move into that corner. There's a 9-month waiting list for the residential. And now with Jimmy John's, we're 100% leased on the retail, with restaurants and other type of activities. The first LEED certified chamber building in the United States is in downtown Waco. The transformation of, gosh, we really don't think we can do this, we don't deserve this in downtown Waco, to what it is today is quite a transformation. I show this picture from the standpoint of the lessons learned in Sugar Land about the concerts, about the movies, about the ways to breathe new life into a particular downtown area. We're doing the same thing in Waco with concert series, with movies, and things of that nature. And more important, we invested $80 million on our project. We had 5 city blocks that we partnered with the city. And as we invested that $80 million, once again, that was the catalyst. That provided the gravity for other development to take place. And as you can see, there's about $300 million planned and or either under construction, and some of this already done at this point in time. This is what our $80 million. I show this from the standpoint of what you had was you had 5 city blocks that the city owned that were all asphalt, that were all parking lots that were sitting there empty. The city had to pay to maintain it. The city was receiving zero ad valorem revenue on that, and now we're paying over $2 million a year. That's the contribution that we are bringing to the city of, and this is just off our projects. This has nothing to do with all of the additional development that has taken place. More importantly, and I say this because I think it's extremely important, you can see on the left, Imagine Waco. That's a plan for downtown, for Waco's downtown. Remember I mentioned when we first started talking to folks in downtown Waco, there was a lot of pushback. And we can't believe that you're even thinking about coming down into this area. We had public hearings. We had a number of meetings, the largest of which was, I think we had over 600 folks there. Many times when you have over 600 people, you don't necessarily want to be there. It can be kind of an exciting experience. And in this situation, everybody was on the same side of the table. We created tax increment reinvestment zones, public improvement districts, downtown merchant associations, so we had everybody rowing in the same direction with the same common goal. The plan on the left was just adopted by their city council in the last 30 days. And this is a plan that we spent a great deal of time working with the citizens. That plan provides for over 20,000 people living in downtown over the next 10 years. And that's the type of activity that took place. It took the leadership of what they call a council, here a commission. It took that leadership. This is your project. This is a project that basically starts right here, and it involves all of the input of so many different people within this community, so that you know that when you're making decisions, it's the community's vision. And that's exactly what has been adopted for Waco. As it relates to Amarillo, this is just one of, I know there's been several conceptual plans. This is just one that was put together. And over the last 9 months, I think when we were first approached by Melissa and her board to start having dialogue of, is this something that we might have an interest in pursuing? The thing that I really liked about this community, as I mentioned, was its leadership, its history, its culture. So many people coming together for how can we really do a lot of wonderful things within this community. There's so many things that have taken place. How can we continue to move forward? I think this is a wonderful first step as you move forward. What Les and Melissa asked us to do is, what are some of the similarities? What are some of the things that our firm, what we have done specifically as it relates to downtown Amarillo? That building on the left, the Emerald Suns Hotel in Mobile, Alabama. It's a building that was shut down. It was a hotel shut down as a result of hurricane damage for many, many years, boarded up. And to be able to go in and renovate that as we did, to be able to do that from the private sector, to be able to do a large full-service hotel and convention center that we've done from the public sector, limited service activities. These type of things from a hotel is something that's extremely important. We know that parking infrastructure. A lot of times when I was sitting as an elected official, I would be talking to people as it relates to architectural design, as it relates to what is this building going to look like? What is this, in this case, parking garage going to look like? and representing the citizens, a number of things that we would want as a public entity. Many of the upgrades that we would want, whether it's the bricks, whether it's landscaping, whether it's recessed lighting, all of those things we were able to put into these. These are parking garages, some from the private sector that we have built, some from the public sector that we have put together. Entertainment. Obviously, as you start talking about a multi-use type of a facility, as I think you know, it's not just baseball. It's hundreds of different type of activities, events that go on to help to provide the foot traffic, to help to bring people down into a particular community. I'm showing this from the standpoint of things that we're involved with as it relates to minor league baseball, as it relates to, on the left, entertainment facilities. I own the Sugar Land Ice and Sports facility. It's the only two-sheet ice skating facility in the Houston area. We bring in over 100,000 discrete visitors a year into that one facility. It's that type of foot traffic that we would be looking to bring in from a recreation center. We've signed agreements with the city of Topeka. You can see where their state capital is. You can see the project site. Very similar process that has taken place right here in Amarillo as it relates to the project site. And that's what we're doing there as it relates to bringing a minor league baseball team, stadium, which provides the infrastructure upon which you can build residential, retail, commercial around. But again, breathing new life. The state capitol, this is wonderful. It's great when you walk down there during the daytime. At night, there's nobody there. And what we're trying to do is to transform that. East Montgomery, this is the northeast part of Houston. Many of you might have heard of Kingwood. Kingwood is one exit south. This is on 59. This is land that we already own. Moving forward, we've signed agreements with a minor league baseball team. We've signed agreements with the East Montgomery Management District. We've also signed agreements with a guy that you may have heard of by the name of Cal Ripken, Ripken Sports. And this is what we're creating on land that we already own. It is everything from hotel to minor league baseball. And then you can see on the southern portion what we're working with Cal Ripken and Ripken Sports. This is what they created just outside of Baltimore. Cal Ripken has 3 minor league baseball teams. And this is a facility that they created through their Ripken Sports Camp. In the middle of this, you can see just under the word youth, you can see some red brick structures. Those are 2 hotels. An extended stay as well as a limited service hotel. About 65% occupancy just from the sports teams, the tournaments, the educational, the training, things that they're doing there. Again, which continue to help from an economic development, help to stimulate the economy from a tourism perspective.
You probably heard that Nolan Ryan's daughter lives here.
I didn't know that. I did not. Let me wrap up with 3 or 4 slides here, and then I'd love to open it up for questions. Melissa actually used this when you were making the introduction, that change is inevitable, and the best way to predict it is actually to get ahead of it and create your own future. The thing that we have seen for a lot of communities that have continued to progress even in this downturn are those communities that are continuing to reach out to the private sector in areas not just in the public works, not just in police, fire, public works, those areas, but in other type of economic development, other type of real estate activities. Some of the keys that we have here, a clear community vision. That doesn't start just with a commission. It doesn't start with city staff. It doesn't start with a private developer. It starts with the community. It reaches out to the community as to what assets are they looking for, what do they want to support. It needs to be this community's vision and this community's asset. Having those type of specific goals, obviously you've seen some land plans that have certain goals, but those goals are not just from the standpoint of infrastructure. Those goals are from the standpoint of what type of revenues do we want to be seeing. If we build this, how is that going to impact us from a community, from an economic development standpoint? The creation of synergies, as I mentioned, having a public-private partnership where you can share in those infrastructure costs, where you can create the economies of scale. Flexibility, I think, is critical. Problems are going to happen. And when you have a public-private partnership, you can think of any type of partnership that you have, whether it's in business, whether it's in marriage, issues come up. And the ability of having that flexibility so that you can sit down and take the time to sit around the table and talk professionally about how we're going to overcome those. And it does require flexibility. It needs to be a win-win situation for everybody. You don't just throw money at issues. You make sure that it's a good investment. And as you're investing dollars from the public sector, being the stewards of the citizens' dollars, you need to make sure, as you know, that what is the return? What are the benefits? Whether those benefits are in revenue streams or other intangible benefits that are out there. The strong public input, I can't stress that enough. I probably have already said it 10 times, but that is something that is extremely important. And as we continue to move forward in connection with this, there would need to be a number of public hearings, a number of task force, a number of folks where everybody's voice is heard so that we can make sure that you get the input from the citizens as to what the citizens are looking for. And then the private sector partner that has experience, that has, I guess, all the traits that you were looking for when you mentioned that. The benefits of having somebody, whether you call it a master developer, whether you call it a fill in the blank, having the ability to mitigate the risk from the public sector. I realize the public sector, I've been there, is very risk averse. And to the extent that the private sector can be able to come to the table to take some of that risk. I think the question was asked earlier when Melissa was going through the risk that we share in the risk. That's extremely important. You need to make sure that you do have that clarity of roles and responsibilities so that when we move forward, again, that partnership is extremely important. This is one large project. I've seen situations where literally with two communities within 2 miles of one another on the street, where you've got one community where the public sector, every time there was a change in administration, there was a change in land use, change in philosophy of that development. It was to be a town square development. It is still languishing 15 years later, 2 miles away on the same street. You had a public-private partnership where they spent the time working together. What is the community's vision? And now it has been a tremendous success. The third-party surety of completion. There have been situations, even in Waco, where we worked with local private developers, but those local private developers were to bring capital. And as a result of their cost overruns, it created difficulties in the downtown. We literally have invested in just Waco alone over $3 million of our own private sector capital to help solve cost overruns of other people's problems. Having the surety of a private sector that can come up with that type of capital is extremely important. The economies of scale from an architect engineering, these aren't all separate, discrete projects. They're all part of an overall development. And to the extent that you can use local subcontractors, local contractors, local architects, engineers to be able to keep the capital in this community is extremely important. And then also just the material pricing, again, the economies of scale. The quality and consistency of development. As I mentioned, both the public and the private sector have a seat at the table. The public sector being a partner, the public sector are bringing significant resources to the community, to this partnership. Having a seat at the table where there are certain architectural standards that you might want as the public sector. This is not a private developer coming in and saying, here's what I want to create, and then leave. This is something that you come in as a partner. Coordination of the design and development, as I mentioned, on those other two communities, and then having an experienced team. I think this is the final slide from a guiding principles perspective. We know that there are certain goals and objectives that have already been articulated through a whole series of different processes along the way with Downtown Amarillo Inc., with the commissioners, with this community. We know what the community is looking for. We feel that we can bring that to the table as well. Each participates in the development and approval of the plan. Again, we are partners as we move forward. This is an evolutionary process where it's not just this is what we want and we're not going to do any more. It's the city obviously has a number of things that the community is looking for. As I mentioned, you have to receive a benefit for any type of resource you're putting in, as does the private sector. Each is making a large commitment from a resources perspective. I could see from the private sector several millions of dollars that would be going into this particular project. Each has input, approvals. There's several steps, several bites at the apple along the way. as you continue to move forward with this very transparent, very public process. And then, as I mentioned before, each have the defined roles and responsibilities. With that, I would like to thank you for your time. And as I mentioned, over the last 9 months, we've met a lot of people in this community. We've learned a lot about this community, and it is one of the most vibrant communities that I've seen. We look forward to taking this to the next step. So we think there are some wonderful things that we could do together. And with that, I'd love to open it up for
Thanks,
questions.
David. You know, I was writing down the questions, but every time I'd write one down, the next sentence you would answer it, every time. And my last one on here was, do you think Amarillo can achieve this goal that we have?
Most definitely. Most definitely. That's one thing I've seen about this community. This is not just commissioners, not staff. This community has such a can-do attitude, and it's very resilient. And what I've seen in this community, when the public and the private can come together on its goals and objectives, as long as those are defined, clearly defined goals and objectives, this community can do it. Okay.
Well, I know this is the way the state is going, and as I travel, I was just in Fort Worth this week in the Woolworth building, the huge.
Isn't that brilliant?
Oh my gosh, it was just amazing.
Right off the 7th.
But do y'all have any questions you would like to ask specifically? Great presentation. You covered everything.
Thank you.
Everything. And you did a great job. We really
Well,
appreciate
Jared
it.
said I had 4 hours, and so I
You did? I wish we did. I wish we did. We have some golf we've got to talk about.
I understand.
Thank you so much. And I know we'll be talking again. And thank you
forward
for
to
the
it.
recommendation. You guys, you really did your homework. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And you're welcome to stay. We have some golfers that want to come in here, I think. I heard them out there. I think I did. Is that Nick? wait,
Mayor,
wait.
I might suggest we change that just a little bit
Okay.
based on time.
Okay.
I think we can cover your agenda reasonably quickly.
Okay.
So if you would, we might consider doing that, and that'll leave us the remainder of the time then to walk through the golf stuff.